Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about answering yes or no questions through divination. I'll start by saying that this dialogue is going to encompass various permutations of the yes or no concept, as I'm going to call it, questions and inquiries that speak to a definitive set of answers, where there's less interpretation and room for dialogue, where it's either this or that, or a series of potential outcomes, as opposed to a more situational inquiry that may be fleshed out or spoken about in depth, where I would say some agency is removed from the equation as well, which I'll also get into. When it's either this or that, there's less room for control and the ability to exercise free will. At least that's my opinion. So I'm going to speak to how to go about getting those answers, what forms of divination I think are best for acquiring those answers, and along with just going through a few types of divination and how you might go about acquiring those sorts of answers, in my opinion. And then I would say more theoretically speaking about what those questions signify for me as a reader, for myself, or when I'm working with others or my clients. I think that it's an interesting point of conversation. I think it's a very specific subset of question that is asked, and one that begs many questions, at least in my opinion. I tend to shy away from, or am less inclined to answer questions that are so straightforward and forthright in that way. I do think that it does, again, like I said, take away some agency. They can be disempowering, in my opinion, but I'll get into why I think that is the case. Oftentimes when I'm doing readings, I'm using tarot, and so I may be asked, or anybody out there, any of you, may be asked yes or no questions when consulting the tarot or any sort of deck of cards, Cardamancy, when engaging in Cardamancy. I don't find Cardamancy to be the ideal form of divination for these more dualistic ways of looking at questions. I think tarot in many ways asks more questions than it answers, and that's part of why I prefer it as a tool and part of the beauty of it, in my opinion. But if we must look for yes or no answers in the cards, this is really how I go about it. I do think that going into the cards with a certain way or a certain system of deciding what is yes and what is no is going to be important. So maybe even numbers are yes and odd numbers are no. I know some people do that. You may even put numbers on the court cards so that way you don't wind up with a weird scenario there. If you really are looking for a true yes or no, you may want to add some interpretive quality to it, where the idea of the card is really what's giving you the yes or no, but then of course you're probably going to have some sort of caveat. Cards are, in my opinion, less likely to say something like yes or no. You're always going to have the yes but or no and scenario that comes up. So for example, if you were doing the odd or even method, you get an ace, that would be considered a no, although if we are tarot readers here, aces resoundingly in many circumstances would signify the idea of a yes, so that might be a little counterintuitive depending on how you look at the cards. If you were doing a more interpretive method where you decided that the idea of the card is going to give you a yes or a no, you might, for example, get the Six of Discs or Six of Pentacles, which in my opinion would be more of a yes, but there is an element of teamwork, camaraderie, or sharing. There is a concession that needs to be made or a compromise that needs to be made in order for this to be a yes. You're not going to get everything you want out of this. You're going to have to give a little bit and be willing to accept slightly less than maybe you had wanted as far as an outcome goes. Or there may be other people involved in the scenario that you may not have foreseen, or you might have to call out for help in order for this to be a yes. Something akin to that. I do have some notes that I'll be referencing because I have some points that I want to touch upon. But I will say that I don't think tarot or cardamancy is the most ideal way of seeking out answers in that capacity. I do have a video on getting specific answers with the cards, which I'll link around here. That's more so about getting down to the heart of what a question is asking in order to ascertain a proper answer. I do think that questions asked are going to be reflective of their answer, and what I mean by that is that a specific question or a well-posed question is going to get a well-worded or well-posed answer. There's that sort of saying, there's no such thing as stupid questions, which is often uttered in classrooms by teachers. I do think that there are quality to questions. There are higher quality questions that are going to yield really insightful and interesting answers and responses, and there are lower quality questions which are going to, I would say, result in the utterance of maybe a lesser quality answer or something that is not necessarily helpful or fruitful. So posing questions that are poignant, that are really getting to the heart of what it is that you actually want to know, are important. And that sounds very obvious, but there are often times when we don't exactly say what we mean, or we think we're saying what we mean, but we really want to know something else. And sometimes really what we're looking to know is not what we're saying. So really getting specific about our questions is important, and I do speak to that in that video. I'm sure there will be some overlap here. But I do think it's interesting whenever we are confronted ourselves with wanting to know this or that, and when anybody else is really asking that yes or no concept type of question. So what do I have here? Use tools well suited to the question, if it must be a yes or no. In my opinion, I would much rather flesh out the question to discover how we can make it more empowering, what they're really looking to know. For example, I might be asking, should I go to the party or should I stay home? That's a yes or no concept type of question. It's a this or that. But really, I might be looking to know if my friends are going to be there or if I'm going to have a good time. And those are really the set of circumstances that I'm looking to inquire about or to know about in order to make an informed decision. Just knowing if I should go to the party doesn't tell me why. And I might be hinging my attendance at the party based on these certain qualities. So we would want to have more in-depth questions that cause some form of reflection and really get to the heart of what we want to know. But tools that are going to be ideal for yes or no questions are ideally going to be a little bit more simplistic than tarot, something that reflects the simplicity of the question at hand. One that I use often and that I keep on me in the shop or when I'm doing readings for myself or others and this sort of scenario arises are these rocks that I found on the beach. They are roughly the same size, same weight, and same shape. One is a dark color, like a deep charcoal gray. You could argue it's black, and one is more of a creamy white color. And I'm sure that this sort of divination dates back to however long before there were cards, but I'll put them in the bag and just pick one at random. Usually the darker one means no, the lighter one means yes. And so that's, I think, an ideal form. You could do that with tumbled stones, you could do that with rocks you find outside, you could do it with sticks that have carvings on them. Basically just having two of any sort of thing, putting it in a bag or randomizing it in some way, and then selecting it. If you're really looking for that sort of answer. Another one you might try is a coin toss. That's divination in and of itself, although we're very familiar with it and it's considered more of a random sort of trick that we play or thing that we do to make decisions, but I consider it a divinatory form of, well, yeah, divination and answering things. So, and another one I think that is ideal is a pendulum. If you have one, you ask the yes and maybe it swings one way, and you ask the no and it swings the other if you are a pendulum user out there. Those are tools that I would personally consult for yes or no questions. If I really wanted them, the cards would not be it. But I do consult them when I want yes or no with caveats. So that thing I said before, like yes, but, or no, probably not the best scenario, not emotionally fruitful. You're going to potentially be the reason that there's a no, that sort of thing. What else do I have to say on this topic? I don't want to get go off on too big of a tangent. Consider expanding the question beyond the yes or no to see what other possibilities there may be. There's usually many. You can start by even taking a 2-part question with 2 answers, or a 3-part question where there's 3 options, and looking at them and then asking about further things. So I said, should I go to the party or should I stay home? I might start to expand upon this by offering a third narrative or option. What happens if I neither go to the party or go home but do something else? And I would have to maybe come up with what that is, or use the cards or something to that capacity to let me know what that might be. But by adding a third option, I've kind of broken the idea or broken down the concept or escaped the more deterministic, fatalistic way of having this yes or no concept, where I am furthering the potential veins and avenues for, of outcomes for this divination. So you might start with 3 and maybe expand it on to 4. You might write down a list of the potential things that could occur. Try to get as creative as possible, really escaping the deterministic way of looking at the question tends to result in a lot more critical and creative thinking that will probably lead you to the answer without you needing to consult any form of divination, which I find to be a really helpful way as somebody who reads tarot for others professionally. There are many times when I don't even think tarot is maybe the right medium or tool for answering certain questions. I think a lot of questions can be answered by us, and the tarot can be a wonderful way to reflect. And yeah, but I don't think it's always the number one way to go about answering things for ourselves. We need to be able to formulate conclusions on our own without the help of randomization or divination of things outside of ourselves. We don't want to give over our control and agency to something outside of ourselves entirely. Ultimately, we would be consulting, hopefully, the divinatory tool, but then using what we have gleaned or learned there to make an informed decision for ourselves, and not necessarily looking at it like it is holy writ and following it to a T. That's never the ideal. So consider why you're asking a question like this. Do you want a decision made for you? I think that that's something important to ask if you are seeking out these sorts of yes or no concept type questions. Really, are you just trying to foist over your responsibility so that way whatever happens, the consequences or outcomes are not necessarily on your shoulders? They were determined by something that wasn't you, so you don't have to deal with it. Oh, I didn't have a good time at the party, but that's not my fault. Or I knew I shouldn't have gone to that party, the thing told me not to, and so persuaded me to go anyway. And there's sort of this onerous that's taken off one's shoulders, but it's kind of I would say a weakly constructed way to go about most of those types of things. I said, do you want to take the responsibility of choice out of the outcome? How will you feel? Okay, so before actually answering a yes or no question for yourself or someone else, I think it's important to decide or at least consider. And I know I've been in circumstances where I didn't really think about how I would feel depending on which one's selected, but you might want to consider how you will feel if the answer is yes, how you will feel if the answer is no in advance. So should I go to the party or should I stay home? How will I feel if the party is selected? So assuming the party is selected, before I even go about this, I want to pretend like it's been selected, and then I want to run through the gambit of emotions that flood in, and the thoughts and the feelings, and just the bodily reaction of what that outcome would be like. If the answer is to stay home, I might want to also then consider, how am I going to feel? What is that reaction going to look like for me? And that right there might give you the answer. It also might illuminate why it is you're consulting a tool in this way, why you're looking for a specific yes or no, and also what reasoning is going into this choice. Like I said before, am I predicating the circumstance on certain individuals being present? Is it about me having fun? Is it about what's going to be the best use of my time in a constructively, mentally stimulating way? Things like that are important to consider. It depends on what you're in the mood for, but running through how you might react to either outcome before you actually go about the divination is going to give you a better idea about why you're looking to have this question answered, and then it also may give you the answer before you even need to ask the question. So what else do we have here? Will you actually listen to the answer is another one. If you're asking something as simple as yes or no, one would hope that that's straightforward enough to actually give you that direction, as opposed to an interpretive answer where one would mull it over a bit and then decide what it actually meant for them and how that might, critically fit into their frame of reference, versus a yes or no, which is, of course, very frankly, bluntly telling you what you should or shouldn't do, what basically you've asked. So are you going to listen to whatever it is? And if you, for example, got the no, and you're a little bit disappointed that it wasn't yes, well, maybe, yes was the answer all along, and we didn't need to consult any form of divination. Not that there's any sort of harm in doing this necessarily, but I do think it's important to think these things through, to understand why we do what we do, and yeah, just to think a little bit more critically. I would say that my biggest tip for divination, tarot, and while I'm using tarot, the number one skill that I find to be super important, creativity and critical thinking, I think are at the top of the list. Outside of maybe just, some baseline understanding of what it is that you're doing, maybe, the general card meanings, or some understanding of the structuring of the deck. But yeah, creativity and critical thinking, which we would then apply to yes and no questions, which is why I'm making this video and having a bit of a chat about it. And this is mostly just coming up because, sometimes I like to ask yes and no questions. I did today. I was compelled to, and I started to journal on the question itself and a few of the things that I'm even speaking about, and that informed my notes. It made me consider how yes and no questions are actually a lot more complex than we give them credit for, and they're asked more often than I actually thought that they were. So I thought I would offer my 2 cents here, and I would very much welcome the 2 cents of many others out there who probably have their own thoughts on this subject matter. But what else do I have here? Ask whys and what ifs. So, yes, okay. So sometimes when I'm confronted with a yes or no question, both if I'm, wanting to pose one myself and if somebody asks me one, I might stop and offer an alternative. And this alternative is very well suited for tarot. This is actually my favorite way to circumvent and flesh out a yes or no question. So instead of saying, should I go to the party or should I stay home, I might ask the cards, what happens if I go to the party, or how will I feel if I go to the party? And then I get something like, we've got the Knight of Cups. So, maybe I will be in my element. I'll be in my zone. I will have people around me. I'll feel more emotionally fulfilled or filled up by the people that attend. And this might be a good indicator of, you having a good time, being more social. What happens if I stay home? And so it's more of a, you aren't asking for an answer that you're then going to follow. You're looking for potential outcomes to review. Then the choice is in your hands. So this is a little bit more empowering, where ultimately the choice is still very much in your hands in the way that you've worded the question. You aren't asking something else to tell you. You're asking for advice. It's almost like you are using the cards as an advisor of possibilities that you're going to then weigh over for yourself and make an ultimate decision, which I find to be a lot more empowering. It also then kind of factors in that idea of understanding why it is we might do what we do, because even though this looks rather positive, and if we stay home we get strife, we get the 5 of Wands here in the Thoth, this one looks a little bit more, it looks a little bit more friction oriented, it looks a little bit more difficult. So we're looking at these, and if you feel more compelled, for example, to take this and try to find positives in it and find a lot more to make light of here, you might actually really have just wanted this all along. Or if you're quick to decide that this is going to be inherently positive and look for faults in this one, maybe you always wanted to stay home from the first place. And that's okay. I mean, in that circumstance, you would probably be projecting, but this is more of a personal matter anyway, so maybe that's totally fine and something you allow yourself to do. But asking the, what if I do this and what if I do that, basically the outcomes for yourself, or maybe how you might feel, this is definitely going to give you, I would say, more freedom. And that's generally a way I like to approach yes and no questions, rather than do this or do that, yes this or no that, what if this, what if that. You might break it down further. You start to then ask more questions, because maybe you're like, why do I feel this way at the party? Or who should I invite with me to, complete this sort of feeling? And then a friend comes to mind with the next card. Or, what about being home is going to be so frustrating for me? Or Am I going to get into some sort of altercation or fight with my housemates or roommates or family? Is that what this card is signaling? And then you pull another card, and then you start to think, well, yeah, so-and-so didn't clean the dishes, and there was maybe a little bit of a bone to pick about who vacuums the living room, and maybe tonight it's probably just best to, give that person their space and go to the party. And so you start thinking about things in that way rather than just, not having to do the mental work of processing all of the things that we really need to sort out as human beings. So I am a very big proponent of the asking, what if this, what if that, why this, why that, than rather just, yes or no. What else do we have here? Adding the third or more option, which I spoke to, and then asking questions surrounding the matter to get a better understanding before diving to yes or no. So I'm using the example of going to a party, so you might want to ask questions of the cards about the party itself. Maybe you're hosting it, or maybe it's your best friend's party. You might start asking questions of the cards in regards to the party itself before you even ask, should I go to the party or should I stay home? If you were hosting it, that wouldn't be much of an option, so we'll just assume that you aren't. But asking questions that are around the question. So you might even think of that in terms of, okay, I'll use the cards to inquire into the circumstances of the party, maybe the attendees of the party, my emotional state regarding the party, and then I will maybe use the pendulum or use the stones or use a coin to then decide if I want to go based on that. And maybe asking about the circumstances gives you the answer, so that way you don't even find yourself in the place of feeling compelled to ask a yes or no question. But I think that about runs through all that I had on my mind at this moment. I think there's a world or, a whole essay's worth to be said on the yes or no concept type of questions and how we can, further break those down, what they're actually, asking any given person. But I thought I would come on, speak to it a bit, and I would be very curious to know how you all feel about these. If that's something that you engage in, if you are vehemently opposed to the idea of yes or no questions, or if they, don't raise any hairs on the back of your neck, so to speak, as they seem to for me. I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this was fun or interesting, and until next time, bye.